The students go to Hogsmeade, and the trio takes shelter in Honeydukes to get out of the wind. They encounter Slughorn there, who wants to know why Herry has been missing all of his parties, and tries once again to invite him to one. But Herry manages to wriggle out again, since it's on the same night as his meeting with Dumbledore. And once again, Slughorn completely ignores Ron. In the movie, this moment happens in the Three Broomsticks. Herry deliberately follows Slughorn there, since Dumbledore had asked him to get close to him, and when Slughorn invites him and Hermione to his party, Herry, unlike in the book, is quick to accept.
Good to see you, Wallenby.
Poor Ron. They also catch a glimpse of Ginny and Dean together kissing in the movie. This happens later in the book, and Ron is much angrier about it, as is Herry. In the movie, Ron just seems mildly pissed, and Herry seems more preoccupied with Slughorn. The trio do head to the Three Broomsticks in the book after leaving Honeydukes. On the way there, they encounter Mundungus Fletcher selling stolen goods, which enrages Herry when they realizes they were stolen from Sirius's house. Herry attacks Mundungus, demanding he give them back, but Mundungus manages to escape. The trio go to the Three Broomsticks, where Herry rants about Mundungus stealing what Hermione reminds him are now his things. This moment actually becomes quite important in hindsight, as two of the objects Mundungus stole will play an important role in Deathly Hallows. The Slytherin locket, which he sold to Umbridge, and the two-way mirror, which he sold to Aberforth. In fact, the trio see Aberforth walking away as they first approach Mundungus. After leaving the Three Broomsticks, the trio head back towards the castle, just behind Katie Bell and her friend Leanne as they get into an argument over something Katie's holding. The cursed necklace wrapped in the package slips out and brushes Katie's skin, causing her to rise into the air and fall. I love the way the movie did this. It's really chilling, no pun intended. It's also kind of terrifying to think that had the necklace touched even the slightest bit more of her skin, she probably would have died. Herry runs for help and brings Hagrid back, who carries Katie up to the castle. I do kind of like how Hagrid warns the teens not to touch the necklace in the movie.
Do not touch that, except for the wrappings.
He may not be the smartest character in the series, but he's no idiot. The trio and Leanne go to Professor McGonagall, where Leanne tells her story.
She left to go to the loo, and when she came back, she had the package. She said it was important that she deliver it.
They all realize right away that someone in the bathroom must have put Katie under the Imperius Curse and given her the package. Now, the movie simply gives away that the package was meant to be delivered to Dumbledore, but in the book, it's more of a mystery. He's one of 3 people the trio suspect could have been the target, the other 2 being Slughorn, since Herry knows Voldemort wanted him on his side before, and Herry himself. Aside from that, though, I kind of like this scene better in the movie, as we actually get to see Snape examine the necklace, whereas in the book, McGonagall simply sent it to him to look at.
I think Miss Bell is lucky to be alive.
Also, this line is just priceless.
Why is it, when something happens, it is always you 3?
Believe me, Professor, I've been asking myself the same question for 6 years.
Harry tells McGonagall his suspicions about Draco Malfoy. In the book, he tells her about what he saw Malfoy doing at Borgin and Burke's. In the movie, he says,
I just know.
Which is a bit lame, but it does lead to this great line from Snape.
You just know. Once again, you astonish with your gifts, Potter. Gifts mere mortals can only dream of possessing. How grand it must be to be the chosen one.
That's honestly something Book Snape would totally say. In both versions, the outcome is the same, however. Neither McGonagall nor Ron and Hermione take his suspicions seriously. In the book, McGonagall's main reason for this is because Malfoy wasn't in Hogsmeade. He was in detention with her. Now, the movie kind of cuts out the middleman. In the movie, it seems like Malfoy planted the cursed necklace and later the poisoned mead himself. In the book, however, as Dumbledore figures out in the end, Madame Rosmerta had been placed under the Imperius Curse, and it was her who, on Malfoy's orders, Imperius Katie and gave her the necklace, and sent the poisoned mead to Slughorn. I really like how Rowling sets up the mystery of who's behind these attacks. In past books, Harry has usually been dead wrong about who the bad guy is. And now, even Hermione, who has a track record of being right, doesn't take his suspicions of Malfoy seriously. Surely this all seems too obvious, and there will be some big twist we're not expecting, right? But no, this time, Harry's got it right. Malfoy is the one behind all this. We're wise to Rowling's tricks at this point, and she knows that. She knows we know a twist is coming, and so the twist, this time, is that there is no twist. Of course, there are two things Harry doesn't figure out. One is the whole Rosmerta thing I just mentioned. The other is Malfoy's mindset behind it. These aren't the vile actions of an up-and-coming Death Eater. They're the desperate actions of a boy who doesn't want himself or his family to be killed. So Snape manages to prevent the curse from spreading through Katie's body, and she's sent to St. Mungo's to be healed. Harry goes to his second lesson with Dumbledore, and it is here in the book where we see the memory of Dumbledore meeting Tom Riddle in the orphanage. This scene was done fine in the movie, I thought. It cut out a lot of the unnecessary stuff, though there are a few things I think could have been included, like Riddle's desire for independence, dislike of not being unique, and contempt for people who succumb to death. Also, I think the way this kid talks is a little too monotone. In the book, there's wild excitement on his face and in his voice when Dumbledore tells him what he is, and he just shows far more emotion in general. After leaving the memory, Harry takes note of how much more quickly Riddle believed the whole wizard thing than he did. Dumbledore, while he had no idea what Tom would grow up to become, says that he was very intrigued with him from the get-go, as his powers were surprisingly well developed already, and he had managed a level of control over them, all without any guidance. And of course, his instincts to hurt those who annoyed him disturbed Dumbledore. Dumbledore points out to Harry Riddle's desire for independence and dislike of anything that made him similar to others. These traits would, of course, not change, as he still relies on no one, but merely uses people to get what he wants. And of course, he changed his name and, well, everything, just to be unique. Dumbledore also points out his tendency to take trophies from his victims. This was sort of like a precursor to what he would later do with the Horcruxes. The movie shows us a kind of awkward scene where Harry and Ron are talking about Ginny and Hermione and heavily implying their crushes on each of them. To be honest, I never really bought the relationship between Harry and Ginny in the movies, mainly due to how much they toned down her character. I just never really saw why Harry would fall in love with her. I did think his feelings toward her were a bit sudden in the book too, but I at least understood why he liked her and felt that they had a real bond, even back in Order of the Phoenix. I never felt that in the movies. In fact, as far as the movies are concerned, I kind of think he and Cho are the better couple. This kind of carries over into the next scene as well, where we see Slughorn hosting one of his dinner parties. Ginny enters, and Harry immediately takes notice of her. Out of nowhere. Oh, and Hermione suddenly says this.
Look at her eyes. They've been fighting again, her and Dean.
Oh, okay. I guess that was the movie's quick way of ending her and Dean's relationship? Well, why include that relationship at all, then? There is a funny moment here when Slughorn questions Hermione about what her parents do, and she explains.
My parents are dentists. They attend to people's teeth.
Fascinating. And is that considered a dangerous profession?
No. Although, one boy, Robbie Fenwick, did bite my father once. He needed 10 stitches.
Aside from the story itself, just the looks of confusion on all the wizards' faces are funny. Following the meeting itself, there's a scene in the movie I actually really love between Harry and Slughorn. Slughorn points out the shelf of his students who became famous, and Harry then asks him about Voldemort.
When I first met young Mr. Riddle, he was a quiet, albeit brilliant boy committed to becoming a first-rate wizard. Not unlike others I've known. Not unlike yourself, in fact. If the monster existed, it was buried deep within.
Slughorn's description of young Tom Riddle tells us a lot about him. He seemed to everyone else just a normal boy, though a brilliant one, who was greatly loved by his teachers. He showed no signs of evil whatsoever, and his teachers, like Slughorn, must be carrying tremendous guilt over not having seen it. Even Dumbledore says something like this earlier in the movie.
Did I know I just met the most dangerous dark wizard of all time? No. If I had,
He never finishes that sentence because I don't think he knows what he could have done. After all, it's still a child he's talking about. So yeah, like I said, this is a genuinely great scene. It sucks that so much of Voldemort's past was cut from the movie, but a few more scenes like this might have made up for that. But no, apparently the romantic drama was more important. But speaking of romantic drama, in the book, Ron and Hermione get into an argument during a herbology class. Hermione mentions that Slughorn is planning another party for the Slug Club around Christmas, and that Harry won't be able to weasel his way out of this one, as Slughorn asked Hermione to check Harry's free evenings, so he could pick a date when he'd be able to come. Ron gets angry again about being left out, and takes out his anger on Hermione by suggesting she hook up with McLaggen at the party, to which Hermione responds that she had been planning to bring Ron as a guest. This seems to calm Ron down, and they drop their argument. We also, thanks to his internal narration, learn a bit about Harry's feelings on Ron and Hermione's relationship. He had a feeling for a while that it might happen, but now he's starting to worry about what could come of it. If they started going out and then broke up, their friendship might not be able to survive it, leaving Harry with two best friends who don't want to talk to each other, and having to act as a peacemaker of sorts. On the other hand, they might not break up, and Harry worries that if that's the case, he might be shut out for good as they only pay attention to each other. Since Katie is now in the hospital, Harry has Dean Thomas take her place on the Quidditch team until she gets back. Harry's pretty happy with Dean's performance on the team and how he works with the other players. But then, after their practice session, Harry and Ron discover Dean and Ginny kissing behind a tapestry. Upon seeing this, Harry becomes silently furious, and this is where it becomes clear that he has feelings for her. As I mentioned before, I always felt like the way in which these feelings first manifested themselves was pretty sudden. But unlike in the movie, I don't feel like it was out of nowhere. There were hints, and they clearly had a connection. I just think Harry's feelings went from 25 to 100 a little too quickly. Still better than the movies, though, where they went instantly from 0 to 100. Unlike in the movie, where Ron simply mutters angrily when he sees Ginny kissing Dean, but seems fine with their relationship afterwards, in the book, Ron actually gets angry at Ginny when he and Harry find her with Dean, and the two of them have a bit of a shouting match. Ron yells at Ginny for kissing in public, though as Ginny points out, it was a deserted corridor, and Ginny retorts that the only reason Ron finds it so disgusting is because unlike the rest of them, he's never kissed anyone, bringing up Harry having kissed Cho and Hermione having kissed Victor Krum. This argument puts Ron in a really bad mood, especially learning that Hermione has kissed Krum. He starts being incredibly rude towards her, as well as Ginny and Dean, and his Quidditch skills take a huge dip, only making him even more bad-tempered and causing him to yell at everyone on the team. When the two of them are alone, Harry threatens to kick Ron off the team if he keeps it up. But Ron, having become thoroughly depressed, actually tells Harry he should and says that he's going to resign if they lose the next match. It's also worth noting that through all of this, Harry is struggling with his newfound feelings towards Ginny. He tries to convince himself that they're simply older brotherly, and that he was angry about seeing her kiss Dean for Ron's sake and not his own. Mainly, he's worried about how Ron would respond and what it would do to their friendship if he and Ginny started dating, especially seeing how he reacted to Dean. At breakfast on the morning of the match against Slytherin, Harry, not so discreetly, seems to slip some of his Felix Felicis into Ron's drink.
Don't drink it, Ron!
Hermione is much angrier about this in the book, whereas in the movie she actually seems somewhat amused. Sure enough though, Ron stops every goal during the match. Following the match, Harry reveals that he didn't actually give Ron any of the lucky potion. He just faked it when he knew Ron was looking so that he would think he had. In the movie, Harry only reveals this to Hermione during the party in the Gryffindor common room. In the book, though, he reveals it to both of them when she comes to confront them in the changing tent. Unfortunately, upon learning that he saved all those goals on his own, Ron's ego inflates to an alarming degree, and he angrily mocks Hermione for suggesting he couldn't have done it without help. A couple things about the match that weren't shown in the movie. First of all, now that Lee Jordan has graduated, the commentary is being provided by Zacharias Smith, who makes several disparaging remarks about the Gryffindor team, like suggesting that Ron and Ginny only made the team because they're friends with Harry. At the end of the match, Ginny deliberately flies right into him and knocks him over, claiming that she forgot to brake. Harry is also interested to learn that Malfoy has dropped out of the match, having had a substitute named Harper play in his place, and wonders what he's up to that was more important, especially since the last time Malfoy claimed to be unable to play, he had the entire match rescheduled. I might as well also mention that I love Luna's lion hat. This was something she first showed them in the last book, but they completely cut Quidditch from that one, so I'm glad they were able to work it into this movie. So, the Gryffindors have a celebration party in their common room, where Ron and Lavender passionately make out in plain view of everyone. Hermione runs out crying and conjures some birds, which she sicks on Ron. This whole section feels very wrong to me in the movie. I've mentioned several times how the movies will often play up Ron's faults while downplaying Hermione's. Well, in this one case, they actually did the opposite. Though not intentionally, I would guess. In the book, it's pretty clear that Ron has no feelings for Lavender and is only using her to get back at Hermione and make her feel jealous after learning that she kissed Krum. In other words, he's being a petty, vindictive, manipulative asshole. Not to mention a hypocrite as he exploded on Ginny for kissing in public. So when Hermione sets her enchanted birds on him, it's honestly completely deserved. In the movie, there's no explanation for Ron suddenly getting with Lavender. He never learned about Hermione kissing Krum, so he's not doing it out of petty jealousy. His feelings for Lavender just seem to come out of nowhere, and as a result, there's no reason to suspect any sort of vindictive motive on his part. It makes sense that Hermione would be upset about it, but unlike in the book, she has no good reason to be mad at Ron. So when she sets the birds on him in the movie, it seemed more like she's the one being petty, vindictive, and jealous. It seems like the movie is trying to portray it like Ron deserves this, even though in this version, he's really done nothing wrong. One other thing, in the movie, Hermione straight up calls Harry her best friend here.
You're my best friend.
Which, frankly, is not something I think either of them would say to each other in the book. They definitely love each other as friends, but Harry's inner dialogue makes it very clear that his best friend is Ron. And as much as he likes Hermione, hanging out with only her just isn't all that fun. And Hermione, for her part, clearly knows this. I think she's well aware that Harry prefers Ron as a friend, given the way she was talking to Harry in Goblet of Fire when he and Ron had their falling out. So much like in Prisoner of Azkaban, Ron and Hermione refuse to talk to each other, and Harry, still being friends with both, tries desperately to mend the rift between them. Unlike in Prisoner of Azkaban, though, where I thought Hermione was only right in a technical sense, here, at least in the book, she is completely in the right. Though she will shortly stoop to Ron's level in her attempts to get back at him. But we'll get to that. While the two of them are talking in the library, Hermione warns Harry that Romilda Vane is plotting to slip Harry a love potion so that he'll take her to Slughorn's party with him. Wait. So Anna Schaffer is playing a character trying to take advantage of a man and manipulate him into loving her? No wonder they cast her as Triss. Harry's reaction to this in the movie, while not at all in line with his book character, I'll admit, is pretty amusing.
Apparently she's trying to smuggle you a love potion.
Really?
Hey, she's only interested in you because she thinks you're the chosen one.
But I am the chosen one. Okay, sorry. Kidding.
And sure enough, as Hermione warns, Romilda gives Harry a box of chocolates as soon as he enters the common room. Harry obviously doesn't eat them. Deciding he'd better ask someone to Slughorn's party before anyone else tries to give him a love potion, Harry takes action.
Well, ask someone I like. Someone cool.
I really like the way the movie framed that moment. In the book, we actually see Harry ask Luna, and Peeves, who overheard, instantly shouts it to the whole school. At dinner one day, while Harry and Ron are discussing Slughorn's party and Harry going with Luna, Lavender arrives, and once again, she and Ron start fiercely making out, very much embarrassing Harry and Parvati, their two best friends. As Parvati starts talking to Hermione, the latter drops the bomb that she's taking Cormac McLaggen to the party. This catches Ron's attention to the point that he stops kissing Lavender. There was a noise like a plunger being withdrawn from a blocked sink, and Ron resurfaced. This is exactly what Hermione wanted, of course. As she reveals to Harry later, she deliberately picked a person she knew would piss Ron off the most. Like I said, until now, Hermione had pretty much all the moral high ground over Ron in this, but now she's starting to lower herself to his level. Harry was left to ponder in silence the depths to which girls would sink to get revenge. So Herry and Luna go to the party, where Slughorn immediately starts introducing Herry to people, namely a writer named Eldred Warple, who is accompanied by a vampire friend of his named Singuini, who looks rather bored, though there is one moment where he hungrily edges towards a group of girls watching him before Warple stops him and sates his thirst with a pumpkin pasty. I kinda like this part. Sanguini, despite being a vampire, isn't all that terrifying. He comes across more like an alcoholic who needs help keeping his drinking in check. In all honesty, I would have liked to learn more about vampires in the wizarding world, but sadly we don't get anything about them aside from this brief moment. But anyway, Warple asks Herry for an interview so he can write a biography on him, but Herry turns him down and he and Luna go over to Hermione, who apparently just escaped McLaggen.
Hermione, what are you doing? And what happened to you?
No, I've just escaped. I mean, left Cormac under the mistletoe.
She admits in both versions that she only came with him to annoy Ron, though as I mentioned, since Ron didn't really do anything wrong in the movie, Hermione comes across more petty and jealous for doing this. In the book, while she is doing the wrong thing by stooping to his level, her anger towards him is at least justified. She even admits in the book that she was debating about bringing Zacharias Smith instead, but figured ultimately Ron would take more offense to McLaggen. Now she's starting to regret the decision though, as she can hardly stand being in his presence. Apparently all he's talking about is himself and the spectacular saves he's made. There is a funny moment in the movie here that wasn't in the book after McLaggen comes looking for Hermione.
You've just bought yourself a month's detention, McLaggen. Not so quick, Potter.
That's just great. The movie then shows Snape delivering a message to Herry from Dumbledore.
Message?
From Professor Dumbledore, he asked me to give you his best and he hopes you enjoy your holiday. You see, he's traveling and he won't return until term resumes.
Again, I feel like there's no way Book Snape would agree to deliver a message like this, at least not without doing it in an incredibly snarky and condescending way. In the book, Herry, Hermione, and Luna bump into Professor Trelawney, who is clearly insulted about having to split her classes with Firenze, and Hermione scampers away when McLaggen comes looking for her, leaving Herry and Luna with Trelawney. Slughorn comes over to join them, accompanied by Snape, and starts proudly going on about Harry's brilliance at potion making, which raises Snape's suspicions. After some questioning from Slughorn, Harry mentions that he wants to become an Auror, to which Luna replies with yet another one of her hilarious conspiracies.
I don't think you should be an Auror, Harry. The Aurors are part of the Rotfang conspiracy. I thought everyone knew that. They're working from within to bring down the Ministry of Magic using a combination of dark magic and gum disease.
Even Harry feels it was worth bringing Luna just for this. Like in the movie, Filch then bursts in with Malfoy, who was supposedly trying to gatecrash the party, and Snape takes Malfoy away to talk to him.
Certainly, Professor.
Harry notices that Malfoy looks a little sick, and he follows him and Snape under the invisibility cloak, telling Luna he needs the bathroom. He overhears Snape and Malfoy arguing.
I swore to protect you. I made the unbreakable vow.
I don't need protection. I was chosen for this. Out of all others, me. And I won't fail him.
You're afraid, Draco. You attempt to conceal it, but it's obvious. Let me assist you.
No! I was chosen. This is my moment.
Harry is surprised to hear Malfoy talk to Snape like this when he always showed respect towards him before. Malfoy thinks Snape is trying to steal his glory by interfering and performing Draco's task himself. In the book, Snape tries to use legitimacy on Malfoy to find out his plan, but is unable to. Apparently Bellatrix has been teaching Malfoy occlumency. You know, it doesn't surprise me that Malfoy would be better at that than Harry. So following this, Harry and Ron go to the Burrow for Christmas. In the movie, we get a rather bizarre scene on the train where Lavender traces a heart into the fogged up glass. As awkward as this moment is, I have to admit, Ron's reaction is pretty funny.
Lovely. All she wants to do is stop me. My lips are getting chapped, look.
And I'll take your word for it.
The book doesn't show us this and just jumps straight to Harry and Ron at the Burrow helping cook dinner. They discuss the conversation Harry overheard between Snape and Malfoy, and Ron explains to Harry what an unbreakable vow is.
It's just you can't break an unbreakable vow.
I'd work that much out for myself, funnily enough. What happens if you break an unbreakable vow?
You die.
Harry says he's planning to tell Dumbledore and Mr. Weasley about what he heard, to which Ron responds that they'll probably say Snape was only pretending to help Malfoy to find out what he's up to. And it turns out he's right. On Christmas Eve night, Harry tells Mr. Weasley about it, and both he and Lupin, who is visiting, brush it off, with Lupin saying that if Dumbledore trusts Snape, that should be good enough for the rest of them.
It comes down to whether or not you trust Dumbledore's judgment. Dumbledore trusts Snape, therefore I do.
It's worth noting that Tonks isn't here in the book. Apparently Mrs. Weasley did invite her, but she turned it down, choosing to celebrate Christmas alone. I guess they included her here just so she wouldn't be completely cut from the movie. In the book, Lupin goes into more detail on his feelings about Snape, saying that while they'll never be friends, he bears him no ill will and is grateful to him for providing him with the Wolfsbane potion every month while he was working at Hogwarts. He even calls Harry out a bit.
You're blinded by hatred.
I'm not.
Yes, you are.
And he's kind of right. I mean, don't get me wrong, Harry definitely has reason to hate Snape, but that doesn't make what Lupin's saying any less true. Lupin does seem angrier here in the movie than in the book, but Mr. Weasley and Tonks both seem to imply that this is an effect of the upcoming full moon. Harry discusses more with Lupin in the book. First of all, Harry asks what Lupin's been doing lately, and he tells him he's been trying to convince the werewolves to help fight Voldemort, much as Hagrid was doing with the Giants. Unfortunately, like with the Giants, many of the werewolves are already on board with Voldemort. What I kind of like about this is that it adds a bit of an extra layer to what's going on. Both the Giants and the werewolves are siding with Voldemort in large part due to the prejudice and persecution they've faced from the Ministry and the wizarding community at large, while Voldemort seems to value them and promises them better lives under his rule, so they are naturally drawn to him. Voldemort's full of shit, of course. He's just using them and doesn't really care about their plight. He would kill them all in a heartbeat once they were of no further use to him. But you can sort of see why they're drawn to him, especially with Ministry people like Dolores Umbridge actively trying to take their rights away. It's not all black and white, for the most part. Lupin then starts talking about Fenrir Greyback, probably one of the most evil characters in the series. Unfortunately, in the movies, he was given no real focus. He just seems like another Death Eater, albeit a particularly creepy-looking one. However, he has much more of a presence in the book. As Lupin explains, Greyback is an extremely vicious werewolf who genuinely loves killing, and sees it as his mission in life to turn as many people into werewolves as possible so they can take over. He makes sure to position himself close to his intended victims just before the full moon rises so he can be perfectly positioned to strike at them. He specializes in children, as if he bites them young, he can steal them away from their parents and raise them to hate wizards. So yeah, he's a real nasty piece of work, and is making it very hard for Lupin to win the other werewolves over. Lupin even reveals that Greyback was the one who bit him as a child.
Yes, my father had offended him. I did not know for a very long time the identity of the werewolf who had attacked me. I even felt pity for him, thinking he had no control, knowing by then how it felt to transform. But Greyback is not like that. At the full moon, he positions himself close to his victims, ensuring that he is near enough to strike. He plans it all.
Harry then asks Lupin if he's heard of the Half-Blood Prince, wondering whether it could be his father. But Lupin denies having heard of him and points out that James was pureblood. He suggests Harry look at the date on the book, which Harry does and is disappointed to discover it's 50 years old, well before his father's time. The rest of Harry's stay at the Burrow is quite different in each version. I'll talk about the movie first, as it's shorter. Harry talks with Mr. Weasley about what Malfoy was doing at Borgin and Burke's, and Mr. Weasley says that the object they saw Malfoy looking at was a vanishing cabinet.
They were all the rage when Voldemort first rose to power. You can see the appeal. Should the Death Eaters come knocking, one simply had to slip inside and disappear for an hour or two.
It could transport you practically anywhere.
What happened to it? The one at Borgin and Burke's?
Nothing. It's still there.
Again, they're kind of removing the mystery here. It's not much of a stretch to work out what Malfoy's doing after this. The book does have a talk between the two of them, but Mr. Weasley simply says they didn't notice anything missing from Borgin and Burghs, so the Vanishing Cabinet isn't even on the radar right now. Mr. Weasley also confidentially informs Harry that the Ministry isn't making much progress against Voldemort. They've made 3 arrests in the last couple months, but it's highly unlikely any of them were actual Death Eaters. They still won't release them though, as they want to give the public the impression they're doing something. The movie also has a couple of awkward romantic moments between Harry and Ginny, like here where Ginny ties up his shoelace and it's just kind of weird. Also this scene where she feeds him a cupcake.
Don't you trust me?
I don't see Book Ginny doing something like this. Book Ginny would have said, "Don't you trust me?" and then smeared it in his face. And then, of course, we have the big attack by Bellatrix and Greyback. Something that never happened in the book at all. I have some serious issues with this. Now, looking at it on its own, I don't think there's anything particularly bad about this scene. I do like the atmosphere here as they're moving through the wheat field. I can only assume they wanted to add some sort of action sequence to the middle of the movie, and I get that. They also probably wanted more of Helena Bonham Carter in this movie, which is also understandable. That said, in the context of the movie as a whole, yeah, I have problems. First of all, the time spent on this could have been devoted to things that were actually in the book, like more of Voldemort's past, or more about the Half-Blood Prince, or hell, the Battle of the Astronomy Tower. And secondly, there are inevitably no consequences to this scene. I mean, look at this. The Weasleys' home is destroyed. There's fire everywhere. What's this gonna mean for them? Nothing. Next movie, the house is completely fine again. There are absolutely no consequences to this attack whatsoever. And the reason for that is because it doesn't happen in the book. It's entirely pointless. So, while there's not really anything technically wrong with this scene, well, to paraphrase James Potter, it's more the fact that it exists, if you know what I mean. In the book, something quite different happens. Percy arrives at the house accompanied by Rufus Scrimgeour, the new Minister of Magic. According to Scrimgeour, they were just passing by, and Percy wanted to come and see his family. Though aside from the extremely emotional Mrs. Weasley, nobody buys this, especially since Percy shows no sign of wanting to see his family at all. Scrimgeour makes a rather unconvincing excuse to talk to Harry, which everyone, including Harry, see through at once, but Harry takes him up on it nonetheless. The two of them have an interesting conversation in the Weasleys' garden. It starts off ingratiatingly pleasant, but gradually the two of them drop their pretenses and become quite bitter. Scrimgeour tells Harry he's been wanting to meet him for some time, but that Dumbledore has been preventing it. He brings up the rumors from the Daily Prophet that Harry is the chosen one destined to defeat Voldemort, and suggests that if the public truly believe that, it would be a good idea for Harry to work alongside the Ministry so as to lift people's spirits. Basically, he wants to use Harry as a mascot to improve the Ministry's image. Harry, not wanting to be used, refuses, and actually calls Scrimgeour out on the things he's been doing. But if I keep running in and out of the Ministry, won't that seem as though I approve of what the Ministry's up to?
Some would say it's your duty to be used by the Ministry.
Yeah, and others might say it's your duty to check that people really are Death Eaters before you chuck them in prison. You don't care whether I live or die, but you do care that I help you convince everyone you're winning the war against Voldemort. Scrimgeour tries to get information about what Dumbledore is up to, but Harry refuses to tell him. Scrimgeour angrily accuses Harry of being Dumbledore's man through and through, to which Harry proudly responds that he is and walks away. I just love this part. This is basically Harry officially declaring to the Minister himself his loyalty to Dumbledore as opposed to the Ministry. What Scrimgeour fails to realize is that Harry is Dumbledore's man through and through, not because he's deliberately being difficult, but because Dumbledore has proven himself to Harry time and time again. The Ministry, on the other hand, pretty much made his life hell last year. And it doesn't help that he learns from Scrimgeour in the conversation that Dolores Umbridge still has her job at the Ministry after everything she did. Scrimgeour is taking the threat of Voldemort much more seriously than Fudge, who didn't even acknowledge his return. However, he too is putting the Ministry's reputation first and foremost, and as Harry points out, is making pretty much the opposite mistake Fudge did. Whereas Fudge took no action against Voldemort whatsoever, Scrimgeour is taking an overly hard-line approach, arresting anyone under even the slightest suspicion, not unlike what Barty Crouch did as head of magical law enforcement. Scrimgeour does have good intentions, and I think he truly believes that if the Ministry's reputation is improved, the public will feel safer. However, he's going about it all wrong by arresting people mainly for show and by overlooking the crimes of Ministry members like Umbridge. And frankly, he shouldn't be trying to make the public feel safe, he should be making them actually safe. Dumbledore is very right to not want to tell the Ministry his plans because they'll broadcast them to everyone just to increase the public's sense of security. That conversation aside, there are a couple amusing moments during the break at the Burrow, like Fred and George teasing Ron about Lavender.
How did it happen? What do you mean? Did you have an accident or something?
What?
Well, how did she sustain such extensive brain damage?
At Christmas, Ron gets a gift from Lavender, a gold chain with the words "My Sweetheart" dangling from it, which kind of disgusts him. Harry's Christmas presents include the usual sweater from Mrs. Weasley, this time with a snitch on it, a box of the twins' products from, well, the twins, and a bunch of maggots from Creature. That's nice. There's also a pretty funny clash of tastes, as Mrs. Weasley has her favorite magical singer, Celestina Warbeck, playing on their magical radio, and Fleur can't stand her, outwardly expressing how much she thinks she sucks, much to Mrs. Weasley's anger. After Christmas, Harry and Ron and Ginny use the Flu Network to transport themselves to McGonagall's office in Hogwarts. They go to Gryffindor Tower, where Hermione joins them, but only talks to Harry and Ginny while completely ignoring Ron. Clearly, she's still angry at him, even after the long break. It doesn't help that Lavender throws herself on Ron, calling him Won-Won. Hermione gives Harry a letter from Dumbledore about their next meeting, and Harry tells her about the conversation he overheard between Malfoy and Snape. Like Mr. Weasley and Lupin, she thinks Snape was just pretending to help Malfoy to find out what he's up to. When Harry tells her what Lupin told him about Fenrir Greyback, she reminds him that they heard Malfoy use him to threaten Borgin, which Harry takes as more proof that Malfoy has joined the Death Eaters. The next morning, the students discover a notice about apparition lessons, which many of them are, of course, really excited about, and at the end of the day, Harry goes to Dumbledore's office. Before they go into the memories, Harry tells Dumbledore about his meeting with Rufus Scrimgeour. According to Dumbledore, the idea to use Harry to improve the Ministry's image was originally Fudge's. He wanted to meet with Harry about it, but Dumbledore refused to let him. Harry, of course, can't believe that Fudge would have the nerve to ask that of him. After everything Fudge did last year? After Umbridge? There's a rather touching moment after this where Harry almost moves Dumbledore to tears. He accused me of being Dumbledore's man through and through.
How very rude of him.
I told him I was. Dumbledore opened his mouth to speak and then closed it again. Behind Harry, Fawkes the Phoenix let out a low, soft, musical cry. To Harry's intense embarrassment, he suddenly realized that Dumbledore's bright blue eyes looked rather watery. Dumbledore then tells Harry that Scrimgeour had Dawlish follow him to find out where he goes when he leaves the school, so he had to jinx Dawlish to stop him. This actually becomes a bit of a running gag. When we first met Dawlish, Dumbledore says he got outstanding on all of his nude exams, yet every time he's mentioned after that, it's because he's been the victim of some curse or spell. Harry then tells Dumbledore about the Snape Malfoy conversation, but to his annoyance, Dumbledore brushes it off as unimportant. The reason for this being, as we later learn, that he ordered Snape to offer Malfoy help in hopes of finding out what he's up to. So after all this, Dumbledore tells Harry about Tom Riddle's time at Hogwarts and his own suspicions of him during that time. He then shows Harry a memory of Morphin Gaunts where the teenage Voldemort arrived at his house and attacked him. The memory then ends suddenly, and he and Dumbledore are forced out. As Dumbledore explains, this was because Morphin couldn't remember anything from that point on, as Voldemort had stunned him and then, after having killed his own father and grandparents with Morphin's wand, altered Morphin's memory to make him think he did it. Dumbledore tells Harry about Morphin's arrest, and that in his efforts to learn as much about Voldemort as possible, he visited him in Azkaban. Apparently, given how deeply this memory was buried in Morphin's own mind, it took a lot of legitimacy on Dumbledore's part to extract it from him. Unfortunately, before Dumbledore could use it to clear Morphin's name, Morphin had died. Sure, his death isn't exactly a tragedy, but it's still not right for someone to be convicted of a crime they didn't commit. Harry then brings up a pretty decent point. If the Ministry can detect underage magic, why didn't they notice when the 16-year-old Voldemort used magic to kill his father and grandparents? Well, according to Dumbledore, this is because the Ministry can only detect the location the spell was cast, not who actually cast it. In Chamber of Secrets, the hovering charm Dobby used on the pudding was blamed on Harry because he was the only wizard known to be in that location. Dumbledore shows Harry a second memory. This time it's Slughorn's altered memory of the time Tom Riddle asked him about Horcruxes. He's changed it to make it seem like he always knew Riddle would go bad and like he refused to tell Riddle anything about Horcruxes. It's a little weird in the movie how the word Horcruxes is faded out.
It's called, as I understand it. Beg your pardon?
I'm not sure why Slughorn would want to hide that. All he would need to hide is the fact that he told Riddle anything about them. Also, I'm not sure I like the portrayal of Riddle here. He's played by Frank Delane, the son of Stephen Delane, and to be honest, I don't really blame him for this. He does a good job coming across as creepy. The problem is, he's not supposed to be creepy. He's supposed to be able to appear normal very convincingly. Slughorn said it himself earlier.
If the monster existed, it was buried deep within.
I feel like Christian Coulson nailed this in Chamber of Secrets. Of course, I understand that he might have been a little too old by the time this movie was made. Well, in any case, after emerging from the memory, Dumbledore gives Harry the task of persuading Slughorn to give up the real memory. In the book, Harry does question why Dumbledore can't do it himself using Legilimency or Veritaserum, to which Dumbledore responds simply that Slughorn will be expecting both of those things, and that he is quite skilled at occlumency. Thus, the best option is persuasion rather than force. During their next potions class, Slughorn has each student take a bottle of poison and come up with an antidote for it. Unfortunately, as Hermione smugly points out, the Half-Blood Prince won't be able to help Harry this time. Now, this is just my opinion, but I find Hermione really annoying at this part. I mean, to me, this seems like she can't handle not being the best in class, so she's acting incredibly vindictive towards Harry simply because he's been doing better than her all year. Here's the thing. I'm sure Harry would have gladly shared the Half-Blood Prince's instructions with her. It's not his fault she stubbornly refuses to follow them despite them constantly being proven to work better. Being unable to come up with an antidote himself, Harry notices a note the prince wrote reading, "Just shove a bezoar down their throats," and remembers what Snape said in their first ever potions class.
A bezoar is a stone taken from the stomach of a goat and it will save you from most poisons.
So he grabs a bezoar from Slughorn's cupboard and presents it to him at the end of class. Now this is technically cheating, but Slughorn just finds it really funny and cheeky, saying it's something Lily would have done. After the rest of the class leaves, Harry hangs back to talk to Slughorn. I like the way the movie handled this scene, especially having Harry use almost the exact same wording Tom Riddle used. Unfortunately, he doesn't succeed in getting the memory from him. All he does is make Slughorn suspicious, and as we see, Slughorn goes out of his way to not give Harry any more opportunities to question him, leaving quickly at the end of lessons and not throwing any more parties. Hermione, meanwhile, is incensed that she can't find anything on Horcruxes in the library. The library had never failed her before. The students then have their first apparition lesson in the Great Hall, taught by a ministry wizard named Wilkie Twycross. Apparently the magic that prevents apparition in and out of Hogwarts has been temporarily lifted in the Great Hall. No one manages to disapparate properly throughout the lesson, though Susan Bones does end up splinching herself, leaving one of her legs behind. Thankfully, the heads of house manage to reattach it. Harry does overhear Malfoy talking angrily to Crabbe during the lesson, saying he doesn't know how long something is going to take, and that Crabbe and Goyle just need to keep acting as lookouts. After the lesson, Harry, determined to find out what Malfoy's up to, starts watching him on the Marauders map. He doesn't learn anything useful, although he does notice that Malfoy sometimes seems to disappear off of the map. On March 1st, which is Ron's birthday, he opens several presents, including a pair of keeper's gloves from Herry and a gold watch from his parents. He then starts eating a box of chocolate cauldrons. The same chocolate cauldrons Romilda Vane gave to Herry months ago. The ones she spiked with love potion. To Harry's bewilderment, Ron starts expressing a deep love for Romilda, to the point that he attacks Harry when he thinks Ron is joking. In the book, Harry even has to use a Levicorpus on him to hold him back. Harry does work out what's happened and decides to take him to Professor Slughorn for an antidote, on the pretext of taking him to meet Romilda. In the book, there's even a moment where Ron blows off Lavender, telling her Harry's going to introduce him to Romilda. That can't be good for their relationship. Also, let me just say, I love Rupert Grint here. His blank, love-struck faces are comedy gold. And this moment where he hugs Slughorn is just priceless.
Hello, darling. How's your drink?
This scene plays out pretty much the same in both versions. Slughorn makes the antidote and gives it to Ron. By the way, his facial change from happily love-struck to confused horror is another hilarious moment. Slughorn then opens a bottle of Madame Rose Myrta's oak-matured mead, which in the book he admits he was supposed to give to Dumbledore for Christmas, and pours a glass for each of them. Thankfully, Ron drinks his immediately before Harry and Slughorn can drink the poisoned mead, and Harry rushes to the cupboard and finds a Bezoar to give to Ron, saving his life. Ron is moved to the hospital wing, where the twins, Ginny, and even Hermione have all come to visit him. Unlike in the movie, we don't see any of the teachers here. Instead, the Weasleys and Harry discuss how Ron could have been poisoned. The twins suggest Slughorn may have done it, but mixed up the glasses, meaning to get Harry. Ginny suggests the entire bottle could have been poisoned and that Slughorn himself was the intended target, or possibly Dumbledore, since Slughorn had been planning to give the mead to him. As we learn, Ginny's got it right. Malfoy had the Imperious Rosmerta send the mead to Slughorn to be given as a gift for Dumbledore. He just didn't count on Slughorn's greed causing him to keep it for himself. Hagrid arrives, shortly followed by Mr. and Mrs. Weasley, who both thank Harry for saving Ron, which, as Mrs. Weasley points out, makes the third Weasley he saved.
Half our family does seem to owe you their lives, now I stop and think about it. Well, all I could say is that it was a lucky day for the Weasleys when Ron decided to sit in your compartment on the Hogwarts Express, Harry.
The moment where Lavender bursts in, desperately worrying about Ron, and then gets into an argument with Hermione, was not in the book. There is some moment in the book where Ron mutters Hermione's name in his sleep, but Lavender isn't there. And the things she says to Hermione in the book, she later says to Harry about Hermione. To me, this is another case of the movie putting the romantic drama at the forefront. In both versions, this is the moment where Hermione drops her anger towards Ron, but in the book, their feelings for each other don't enter into it at all. Because this scene isn't about that. It's about the fact that Ron almost died. Hermione says so to Lavender.
He's been poisoned, you daft dimpo.
Which is something I kinda want to say to the scriptwriter here. I do like this line from Dumbledore, though.
Oh, to be young and to feel love's keen sting.
In the book, Harry and Hermione leave with Hagrid, leaving the Weasleys alone with Ron. Hagrid accidentally lets slip that Dumbledore's angry with Snape about something, and after Harry presses him for more, tells them that he heard them arguing. Something about Snape saying Dumbledore took too much for granted and that he didn't want to do something anymore. He also mentions something about Snape making investigations into the Slytherin students. Harry takes this to mean that Dumbledore did in fact take his earlier warning seriously, that he doesn't trust Snape as much as he claims, but simply doesn't confide these things to Harry, so he won't be distracted from their lessons. Of course, he's dead wrong, as we learn in Deathly Hallows. Dumbledore does fully trust Snape, and the thing Snape didn't want to do for him anymore was to kill him. The movie then shows Harry following Malfoy as he goes to the Room of Requirement to take another crack at working the Vanishing Cabinet. This is how Harry realizes where he's been going when he disappears from the map. In the book, it's a bit more complicated. Actually, the movie rearranges a number of events here. First of all, Harry sees Katie, who has returned from the hospital, and asks who gave her the necklace, but she can't remember. She then notices Malfoy, and Harry follows him to the bathroom, where he finds him crying and accuses him of cursing Katie. The two of them fight, and Harry uses the Sectumsempra spell he found in the Half-Blood Prince's book, not knowing what it does, and slicing Malfoy open. Thankfully, Snape comes in to heal Malfoy. Following this, Harry has to stow the Half-Blood Prince's book in the Room of Requirement. Not only do all of these things happen much later in the book, but the movie greatly changes how they play out. I'll talk about these changes when I get to the part in the book where they happen, because I have thoughts. The book then goes through several things that were cut from the movie. First of all, Cormac McLaggen approaches Harry, and since Ron will still be in the hospital during the next Quidditch match, asks if he'll be taking over as keeper. Harry can't think of an argument against it, so he agrees. Predictably, McLaggen proves to be incredibly annoying as he constantly tries to provide Harry with his own training ideas, loudly suggests that he would be a better permanent addition to the team than Ron, and criticizes the other players as if he could play all their positions better than them. As if that wasn't bad enough, Harry also has to deal with Lavender Brown, who keeps wanting to talk to him about her and Ron's relationship and how Ron really feels about her. Apparently she can't talk to Ron about this because he's always asleep whenever she goes to see him. Clearly he's faking, though. This is also where Lavender says these things about Hermione.
You haven't spoken in weeks. I suppose you want to break up with him now that he's suddenly all interesting.
It's just that in the book, she's talking about Hermione to Harry rather than directly to Hermione. Harry goes down to the Quidditch pitch for the match against Hufflepuff, and on the way, he sees Malfoy heading back up to the castle with two girls, who we later learn are actually Crabbe and Goyle using Polyjuice Potion. As the match starts, McLaggen gives instructions to the other team members before Harry angrily reminds him who the captain is and orders him to go guard the hoops. Though he does grudgingly give the other team members the same advice McLaggen did. Now, this is the last Quidditch match we'll actually see play out, and Rowling took full advantage of that fact. You see, Zacharias Smith plays for the Hufflepuff team, which meant that there would need to be a different commentator for this match. And who did they get? Luna Lovegood. Rowling said that since she knew this would be the last on-page Quidditch match, she wanted to make it particularly memorable, and had a lot of fun writing Luna's commentary for it.
And that's Smith of Hufflepuff with the quaffle. He did the commentary last time, of course, and Ginny Weasley flew into him. I think probably on purpose. It looked like it. Smith was being quite rude about Gryffindor. I expect he regrets that now he's playing them. Oh look, he's lost the quaffle. Ginny took it from him. I do like her. She's very nice.
There are a couple of particularly hilarious moments where she implies that Zacharias Smith, who has been unable to keep hold of the quaffle throughout the match, is suffering from something called loser's allergy, and where she says a Hufflepuff player's name hilariously wrong.
But now that big Hufflepuff player's got the quaffle from her, I can't remember his name. It's something like Bibble? No, Buggins. It's Cadwallader.
She even starts talking about oddly shaped clouds at one point. McLaggen, meanwhile, is nothing but a hindrance to his own team. He yells at Ginny for losing the quaffle, and as a result, doesn't notice it soar past him through the hoop he was supposed to be guarding. And, the act that loses Gryffindor the match, he tries to show one of the beaters how to hit a bludger, and accidentally hits it directly at Harry, knocking him off his broom and cracking his skull. Harry wakes up in the hospital wing in a bed next to Ron, who informs him that the final score of the match was 320-60 for Hufflepuff. Harry furiously talks about how much he wants to kill McLaggen, but as Ron says, the rest of the team might do that first. Ron, for his part, doesn't even seem upset that Gryffindor lost. If anything, he's thrilled that McLaggen messed up so badly. Later that night, while thinking about Malfoy and what he may be up to, Harry comes up with an idea of how to find out. He calls for Kreacher, who apparates into the hospital wing along with Dobby, who he seems to be fighting with, and Peeves, who's cheering them on. Apparently Kreacher was insulting Harry, which pissed off Dobby and triggered this fight. Harry uses one of the Half-Blood Prince's spells to stick Peeves' tongue to the roof of his mouth, causing him to angrily leave, and he and Ron pull the two elves apart. Harry orders them to discreetly follow Draco Malfoy while making sure to cover any loopholes Kreacher might use to alert Malfoy. Both elves agree to do so, though Kreacher far more reluctantly. Later on, they will report to Harry that Malfoy has been using the Room of Requirement. I understand why the movie didn't feel the need to include this, and simply had Harry follow him to the Room of Requirement. It is, however, the latest in a line of 3 movies that completely cut Dobby from them. Unfortunately, the damage is kind of done at this point. There would be no way to explain Dobby suddenly being at Hogwarts after he was left out of the last 2 movies. His death in the next movie just isn't going to hit as hard as in the book, unfortunately. On Monday morning, both Harry and Ron leave the hospital. Hermione, thankfully, has completely forgotten her anger at Ron, and the two of them are friends again. Hermione informs them that Ginny and Dean had a fight, as Dean had laughed about McLaggen hitting Harry with that bludger. Harry becomes hopeful after this. Luna comes up to them with a letter from Dumbledore about their next meeting, which is tonight. Ron congratulates her on her amazing commentary at the Quidditch match, and then the trio return to Gryffindor Tower, where they find Lavender, who's furious that Ron didn't tell her he was out of the hospital, and that he was with Hermione. Harry leaves that night and goes to Dumbledore's office for their meeting, where he finds Professor Trelawney. Apparently she was there to complain about having to share her classes with Firenze. After she leaves, Dumbledore says that he can't let her leave the castle because she would be in terrible danger from Voldemort, seeing as it was her that made the prophecy that led to his initial demise. And since he can't send Firenze back to the forest where he's now an outcast, he has no choice but to keep them both. Dumbledore asks Harry if he managed to retrieve Slughorn's memory, to which Harry responds that he hasn't, feeling ashamed about not putting enough of an effort into it. He promises Dumbledore that he'll make it a higher priority from now on, and they proceed with their lesson. Dumbledore tells Harry about how Voldemort graduated from Hogwarts and wanted to stay there as a teacher, one reason for which is that he was very attached to the place and considered it his home. Harry feels very uncomfortable knowing that he has this in common with his mortal enemy. Dumbledore tells Harry about Voldemort going to work at Borgin and Burke's, and then shows him a memory from the house elf Hokey of Voldemort visiting her mistress Hepzibah Smith and learning about Hufflepuff's cup and Slytherin's locket. After leaving that memory, Dumbledore explains about how Voldemort poisoned Hepzibah, framed Hokey, and stole the cup and locket. Harry, of course, is confused as to why he wanted them so badly anyway. Dumbledore then shows him his own memory of the time Voldemort returned to Hogwarts to ask him for a job, and he turned him down. The past Dumbledore speaks pleasantly to Voldemort, but still makes it clear he doesn't approve of him or what he's been doing. He also makes it clear that he knows Voldemort didn't really expect him to give him the job, and that he had an ulterior motive for coming. As Harry leaves Dumbledore's office, he asks him if it was the Defense Against the Dark Arts job Voldemort wanted, to which Dumbledore replies,
"Oh, he definitely wanted the Defense Against the Dark Arts job. The aftermath of our little meeting proved that. You see, we have never been able to keep a Defense Against the Dark Arts teacher for longer than a year since I refused the post to Lord Voldemort."
So yeah, there's an actual reason why there's been a new Defense Against the Dark Arts teacher every year. I'm also pretty sure this is why Dumbledore never gave Snape the job. He needed to keep Snape close to him, so giving him the cursed job wouldn't be a good idea. And since he knew Snape would be gone at the end of this year, having planned his own death and all, it was finally safe to give it to him.